I can't say this is the last game that I thought I would ever be doing a video on, but it is certainly a surprising game that I'm doing a video on because my relationship to this game is somewhat uneven, I guess is the word. I was really desperate to purchase it once I became aware of it. I can't really remember how it relates to my involvement with Mistfall. I've done a video on Mistfall. You can see the link to that up there. I really, really loved Mistfall. And in that video on Mistfall, I talked about the ways in which our participation in this hobby is very unique right now, which is that you can almost have a relationship to a game before you even play it. And in the case of Mistfall, what that meant was I had read about it so much and heard about its difficulty and the iconography and the way it was illustrated so much that I already felt like I had practically experienced that game before I played it. And you could watch that video to see a little bit, to hear a little bit more about that. It's not super relevant here, except that this is part of Mistfall, and ultimately I loved Mistfall and Heart of the Mists, and there was this game set in the Mistfall universe. It came in this small box, and it's not a small game at all. And we can see here in the other room, I have the game set up sort of toward the end game. This is where I'm traveling through, and there's a big card offer that needs to be laid out in a certain way, and then the hoard of what's known as your chronicle, your hoard of items that you get for scoring at the end. But anyway, back to the small box, big game, small box. So I became obsessed with getting it. It was hard to get. I don't know that it was ever in retail. I finally purchased a new copy, although it came like sort of banged up, but it was in shrink. It was new. I took it out, extremely hard to sort, and I spent a ton of time trying to find the 6 hireling cards. And of course, there are not 6 hireling cards in the game. There are 5, at least so far as I can tell, because when you look through the rule set here, they're only ever mentioned 5, and they're pictured as 5. I think this is them here. And so that was one thing. That was actually a minor thing. When I tried to play the game, the rules are somewhat opaque. The cards, as we'll see, look very similar to each other. And then when I set it up to play against the Brash Hero here, I ran into some difficulty under the specific rules for the Brash Hero, because it says if the Brash Hero will only purchase a world event deck if it is the cheapest card in the whole offer. And then it goes on. It doesn't matter if you don't know what I'm talking about right now, because you're going to get this point. And then not a few points later, it says the Brash Hero can never purchase a card from the world event deck. Blah, blah, blah. So those are just 2 examples. So I kind of like put it all back together in the box. It was super confusing and, even as I mentioned, hard to sort. Now, what's in the box here is what I'm not using in my game. So what's the point of doing a video? Well, what ended up happening was I put it up for sale, and it sat there for a really long time, and then somebody, like so long that I forgot about the issue with it says it has a certain amount of things and it doesn't. Somebody finally contacted me wanting to buy it, and as I always do when that happens, I went back to the game to confirm that everything was there, that it was complete, and I couldn't find that stupid hireling card, and I was just driving myself crazy because I take really good care of my games, and I just couldn't imagine how it had been lost or why I wouldn't have noted that when I put the game up for sale. Looked through it all, sorted through it all, and started to play it again to try to figure out what was going on, and could I tell from playing it whether or not I was really missing that card. Anyway, long story short, I've been playing it now multiple times. I love it, and I want to talk to you a little bit about it. I'm going to go into the gameplay a little bit. For those of you that do play this game, however, I have a question, and my question is, I can't figure out how it is possible in any way to, no matter how you play this Brash Hero rules, to beat the Brash Hero. That's number one. It is a victory point based game, which generally speaking I don't like. There are ways to play it, and for the most part, I think what I've settled on are some house rules where I do count victory points, and those are important, I suppose, if one wants to see how one improves in play. But I have created win conditions and a timing mechanism using that world event deck that is consistently referenced here to create a timing mechanism to put a limit on the game. The game does run long. Even with my house rules, the game runs pretty long, where the way I'm playing it is using 2 characters and the optional villains to go through the adventure, and we will get into a little bit of the gameplay now, so what the rest of what I'm saying makes sense. But the bottom line with this game, as far as I feel now, and I know there's an expansion, I'd like to get my hands on that, that has official co-op rules, although I am playing co-op with this main box. There's a lot in the box. The bottom line with this game is it feels like a somewhat elevated in terms of complexity Runebound to me. It is not as evocative as Runebound because, as you'll see, the cards on the offer, there's basically no art. It follows the Mistfall aesthetic. I guess you could call it an aesthetic. I sort of feel like it's saving money on art. But anyway, the Mistfall aesthetic of very little original or individual art. Some of the item cards have art. Some of the character cards have art, but even those hireling cards, those mysterious hireling cards, the art is very similar. Here's an example of one of the characters I'm not playing, the Arcane Wizard. The art, and some of this art is picked up as also from Mistfall or Heart of the Mists. That might look familiar to you. Here is another character, the Shield Bearer. What the art is great, but it is limited. And the location cards, as you saw earlier, have art. And here's the Mist Huntress. So that said, let's turn to the game itself and talk a little bit about how it plays, how I'm playing it, and wrap it up with some thoughts about why I think if you are an adventure gamer, even as a soloist, and even as somebody who's not interested in victory point games, this is worth seeking out. This game is ostensibly a deck builder, and I say ostensibly because the overall gameplay is so much more than simply trying to get money to buy more cards, although over the course of the game you are purchasing cards, and as such your deck will increase in power. It has to. We're taking a look here at, just quickly look at a couple of the characters. So here's the Frost Mage character, and if you're familiar with the Mistfall system, you will remember these tokens from the exhaust situation, where in this game you cannot die. You can get completely exhausted, where your hand size is 3 down to very small and you cannot attack enemies, but there's always a place in the map to go back to recover if you need to do that, although getting yourself down that low really does hamper you. You start out with your own deck of cards. They're slightly different, and we'll take a look at a couple of decks here. All the cards basically look like this, and except for the item cards we'll show you, it's just a very boring aesthetic as far as I'm concerned, and unfortunate. I mean, even to the extent, I think it would have even been more thematic if they just like put some swirling wind or something behind here in such a manner that you could still read the icon. I mean, it's just, this is boring to me, but nevertheless, you have cards such as this, Farsight, which will let you scout a location. And I won't go through the icons. There aren't too many icons. And perhaps because there aren't too many icons, they didn't seem to see the need, I don't think, at least, I can't figure out, to actually name some of them. So you have these skill tokens, and the various characters begin with a certain skill token. So this is a magic token because that's the arcane wizard. It doesn't say anywhere, I don't think, that it's a magic token, but obviously it is. Similar to something like Mage Knight, if you want to get the bottom ability of a card, you have an option here. In this case, you could place your skill token to get the additional benefit, or you could exhaust yourself to get an additional benefit, as long as you are able to take that number of additional exhaust tokens, you're able to do that. So this character has a special, this would be his attack, and he gets a +1 attack, or if he could choose to ignore some wounds dealt by an enemy or exhaustion dealt by an enemy, he eliminates this turn, and I'll show you how that works. That's his magical frostbolt. So again, it's just, this is meant to be this sort of magical, like magic missile thing, and this is meant to be his looking out into the distance to see far, and the cards just look exactly the same, and I think that's unfortunate. It's a real missed opportunity there, even with the smallest amount of background art differential, like some sort of frostbolt thing here and some sort of like vista picture. It's a shame. Anyway, concentration. This is I think they call this resolve. It's also in effect the money. It allows you to purchase cards. And the other icon here is the movement icon, and you do need to move using cards, again, much as in something like Mage Knight. You need to move. In this case, in this game, there is an exit cost to the location, not an entrance cost. And I noticed that a lot of people miss that when playing this game, at least as far as the few videos I've seen, but I'll show you how that works. And it can be frustrating if you have no movement. You can be stuck somewhere because you can't necessarily just generate movement. So that's really the iconography, which is a blessing that there isn't that much, but it is made use of extremely well. And we'll just take a look at, so this is the shield bearer, this fighting character, and you do get some flavor text on the back here. And this one, for example, even tells you that this is, Fengrade does not stray far from this iconic image, this image of him as a protector. So it's sort of setting you up to focus on this fist or this fighting skill that you begin with. And you can see here that he thematically can accept more exhaustion tokens without having an impact on how many cards he has than the wizard does. So he can take up to 3. The wizard can only take up to 2 before his powers start to diminish, and he ultimately has more that he can take overall. So the differentiation between the characters is there as well, as it is in the cards that they begin with. So there's slight difference in terms of the starting deck, and he will have, for example, his fighting skill, so he could generate, using his skill, up to 2 axes, 2 fighting powers at the start, and even could generate up to 4 if he took an exhaustion, if he had both of these strike cards in his hand, up even 6. There's the third one. So there's a slight difference in the starting deck, and a suggestion perhaps of the way you want to go to develop it. Well, how do you develop it? And actually, before we talk about how you develop it, I have to give a little sad shout out to the included meeples with the game, rather than giving us even standees. I get it. They want to fit everything in the box. We're not going to get minis, but this, one of these is supposed to represent this, and that's just not going to happen. So you're going to need, if you play this game, you're going to need to get some type of proxy for your characters, or else, I mean, there's nothing like this to take you out of a game as far as I'm concerned. There are quite a number of cards on offer to purchase throughout the game. There are the more expensive cards, denoted by this gold back, and a few of them are actual allies that you can purchase that will give you various benefits. And some of them are items, such as this chainmail, which will also give you an ongoing benefit as long as you have it on your display. And then many of them are cards that go into your hand and cycle through. So, for example, you can see this healing prayer will give an ability to look ahead or to pull more cards into your hand, as well as allowing you to discard some exhaustion tokens if you can boost it up. And then there are the cheaper cards, which cost, say, 2 or 3. The cost is down here, and these cost 4 or up to 6. There's one actually. And these are more cards. So you use these to boost your deck. We also have here the aforementioned World Events deck, and some of these are in the form of quests that you can do, for example, or purchase that you can get victory points or other benefits based on a condition met. For example, in this one, if you get 2 beast tokens and you receive tokens when you defeat an enemy, and here are the examples of the enemies. We'll get into how that works. And then there are the also aforementioned 5 different hirelings who you can purchase for 2 coin each or 2 resolve each at the inn and hang on to them until you need their benefits. So, for example, Segres the Bold can join you in a fight, and then once you use his benefit, he goes back to the offer, and you could get him later if you go back to the inn. The final thing I'll show is the chronicles that are developing, and basically what you're doing in part in the game is retiring cards and retiring enemies that you have defeated for later counting the victory points, and that's represented by this shard here. So you will be doing quests that you have. There's 2 different types of quests that we'll get into, and as you complete them, you'll be retiring those cards for victory points, as well as different cards that you can retire when you want to upgrade your deck. So for example, here, this is a basic card that came at the beginning of the game that at some point was retired for the single victory point, but mostly to thin the deck and get stronger cards. So in that regard, if you're familiar with deck building games, you'll be familiar with the mechanic of thinning a deck to get stronger cards. The last thing we're showing here are 3 of the 4 included villains. This is an optional rule, and these villains basically cannot be defeated by a single character. So they are for a co-op version of the game, and they have various rules, which I will say, frankly, I am ignoring for the most part here, and using them in a different way that perhaps I'll get into, perhaps I won't. But that is the half of the game, not including the map, which we're going to get to. You are traveling through locations that are represented by these cards that you can pull in, and each location has very nice artwork, actually. Again, if you're familiar with Mistfall, you'll sort of be familiar with the similar type of presentation. The locations have a discovery value that when you are the person to flip over the card and bring it into the world, you get that bonus, and a rest value that if you are in this location with no enemy, you can gain the rest value. And they also have the aforementioned exit cost. So, for example, to get out of the Deadlands, you have to pay either by 1 foot card or by 1 exhaustion token. And again, a little confusion here on the iconography because it's not clear that it's either or, but indeed it is either or. There probably should have been a slash there. In any event, when the card comes in, you can see the faint picture that will match the back of one of the types of enemies. So it comes in with an enemy on it, and you can and need to defeat those enemies during the course of the game. And finally, now we're getting a look at the world in which we are traveling. This is toward the end of a game, and we're going to eventually get to game turn so you can see what's going on. I have this marked here. The map is built out from the Haven, the Hearthstone Inn, which is where all players begin, and to which all players may return to rest as well as to spend 2 resolve to recruit a hireling, and we showed those earlier on. And indeed, our Dawnbreaker here has a hireling with her already that she had purchased and not used yet. So until she uses this Curdan will be with her, and here she is standing right here. Well, what are these characters doing? The characters are attempting a lot of things, not the least of which is to complete quests. There are 2 different types of quests in the game, and let us take a look at those. The first type of quest is an exploration quest, and it is a map-based quest where you are traveling through the world to do certain things. And, in essence, it's a movement quest, but you can and should indeed read the flavor text. So here is an attempt to set up a trade route, and you're starting in the inn. You need to move here to start to create the trade route, and when you get to this location, you will be spending lots of resolve, that is to say lots of money, as well as looking around thematically to establish this route. You will get your reward as well as be able to retire the card for victory points. Moving on to the second chapter, where you then need to travel to set up the second part of the trade route and spend what is actually a little bit more looking around and another amount of 4 resolve to complete this quest. So this is a 2-chapter quest. The other type of quest is a search quest, and again, there are various themes with stories that I do recommend sort of reading and trying to think about, because it does tie in. Otherwise, in essence, you're just wandering around to find a certain type of location and spend, in this case, 2 of the sort of scouting ability to look around to, in this case, looking for the tribe of Gorin with a hunting ground upstream, and then it's going to send you to a different type of location to do another thing, and then the final thing. So this is a longer quest of 3 chapters, and also represented by an increasing amount of victory points that you get as well as rewards when you complete the quest. In short, what you're trying to do is complete these quests and to win the game and to build up your chronicle for more victory points. You can see here as we look at the Dawnbreaker's area, all she has left, they've both already completed their exploration quest, so you won't see those cards represented here. They're already piled into the chronicle, and they're both partially through their longer search quest. So she's on chapter 2 of her search quest, and when we come to her turn, we'll see how that impacts her. We're actually going to start right now with showing you the turn of Ravencraig Fury. All he has left to do is the final chapter of his chieftain, a new chieftain quest. Having located the underlings of the new chieftain, there was a plot that had arisen that he was trying to break up. You were able to find out the location of his main camp. Now is the time to strike and make the ruthless hunter prey. So you need to spend 5 attack, which is quite a lot, in the hunting grounds location. Now, unfortunately, we've been traveling through this whole world here. We have not yet found the hunting grounds. I'm just scanning again because I have had issues where I've not noticed that something had come out early on, and this is my standee for the Ravencrag Fury is here, and I found that's pretty good, actually. I've got this little thing here to remind me for the video, and this is my standee, also pretty decent for the Dawnbringer character. Again, much better than Meeples, even if you use, I don't know, anything really. Ravencrag Fury. you can see a couple of things here. This is his draw pile, which is really only 4 cards at this point. And he's got his hand full of 5 cards. Even though he has his 3 wounds, he can take up to 3 exhaust and still have no impact on his hand size. He doesn't have a lot of cards. He's really thinned his deck to build up the Chronicle, to build up the victory points. And this is where, again, there's some flaws in the game playing it in this manner, not competitively, because in essence it is a competitive game with the victory points. But to be true to what the game is attempting to do, I did follow through with thinning the deck and retiring cards. So he's working in a very constrained manner, although a lot of his cards are pretty powerful. Whereas the Dawnbreaker, she actually has not, this is her discard pile. She's got a lot of cards in here. She's got a few in her draw pile, and her hand size is unfortunately only 3 right now because she's carrying all this exhaustion. So with all this exhaustion, she has a hand size of 3 and she's unable to attack enemies. So we'll see how that operates. But for various reasons, she just has not been retiring as many cards. And so there is a very effective, I think, tension between stronger cards in your hand, but just not as many of them, and a bigger deck that maybe is weaker. I mean, overall, I think she is the weaker character here. She's also not quite as far along with her quests as he is. The timing mechanism that I said I was using here is a house rule where I placed villains throughout the 25 card world events deck and in essence pulled them through to have to be fought against before that deck ran out, or else these characters would lose, because otherwise you could just kind of keep playing the game forever. It's already a long game, but because you never die, you could just kind of keep getting exhausted and then slowly moving back to the inn and then kind of going back out again, and it tends to drag a little bit. So enough said of all that. Let's take a look at, this is my first player character turn marker. Let's take a look at what the options are for Ravencrag Fury right now to really give you a flavor of the depth and choices in the game. All right, so with just this one turn, taking a look at the Ravaging Fury's turn, we're going to see how many different things there are to do in this game. He's got 3 wounds or 3 exhaustion, which for him, because he is a mighty character, has no effect on his hand size. So he's going to be starting with 5 cards, and I guess I have to draw another one with 5 cards here. His immediate goal is, or his remaining goal, is to spend 5 attack in the hunting grounds location to try to scare off or eliminate this new chieftain. Now, the hunting grounds location has not come out yet, and unfortunately for us, and this is a fact of the game, that there's a certain amount of randomness to it where you can be wandering around a bit, because we've actually only have these 5 locations left. So it's in one of these, but we don't know where it is. So that might lead us to want to scout ahead, but we can't actually, we're landlocked here. So we're going to have to move if we're going to be able to do that anyway, because you can only place a location adjacent to you. Now, we do have this token. This is a 2 scout token that we earned doing something else. So we could use, let's see, 2, 3, 4. We're trying to come up with 5. If we came up with 5 scout ahead, we could look through everything in the deck and actually pull out the card that we need, the hunting grounds, and place it here. If we were able to move over there. We have a movement only of 1, but you can see here the exit cost from the Ancient Barrow is 2. We can take that, we can spend a movement. I think what we're going to aim to do is this. We're going to spend a movement here to go out of here, and we will need to spend the second exit cost as an exhaustion. So we can do that. So we're going to spend the card plus the exhaustion to move to the plane of ice. Now, conceptually in the game, if there is an existing
enemy here that hasn't yet been defeated, so there are these cut purses here. We don't necessarily have to have combat with it because conceptually you're in a very large area, you might not be near it, whatever. We could engage with combat, but really right now our main goal is to get out this hunting grounds. Now, it is a risk because we're going to be spending not quite enough to pull it out. We're going to be able to spend 2, 3, and use our skill to get 4 scouting. That's all we have to look through the top 4 cards of the deck. Now, the problem is, you may say, well, if it's not these, you know it's this. Yes, we do, but when we put them back, we have to shuffle them. So it is a risk. We're going to hope that one of these 4 is the hunting grounds, because if it's not, we are... it's not. It is not. So that's got to be the hunting grounds. Unfortunately, we can't just know that and save that because we're going to have to put these all back. So we did a lot of scouting and it did not pay off. That's got to be the hunting grounds, unless, I've done this to myself again and played something and not noticed, but I double checked. So that's the hunting grounds. That was just bad luck. So then the question is assessing, well, what do we want to have happen? The discovery benefit we will get when we place it. So all these discovery benefits are the same. We for here we could get, this is money to spend. We're not really interested right now in upgrading a card. We might look to see, does our friend over here need anything? So for our friend's quest, she has to retire a brigand enemy token in a key location. A key is a word that can appear. None of these are key locations. So her location is probably out already, and she just has to get to it. I'm not sure it makes a huge difference. The rest ability or the rest benefit you only get if you are in a place with no enemy at the end of your turn. So we would have to eliminate an enemy, but we're not even going to be able to move in there. So I think what we're going to do is just look to, let's see, I think we're going to look to discover the noxious morass, because the rest ability here, the exit cost is high, but if we got rid of something, we would get to move to an adjacent location and use that rest ability, and that would be back to this one. So that's pretty good. I think we're going to just discover this. So we will, unfortunately, as I said, we did not successfully find what we were looking for. That was just super bad luck. This is going to be the hunting grounds, but we're going to have to mix it back up with everything else because we can't, we can't seed this deck. So that's now, unfortunately, going to be random again. We're not indeed going to move in there. What other cards do we have left to play? Well, we have options now for attacking. Unfortunately, we used our skill to buff up the scout ahead. This enemy here is, as mentioned, this cut purse. To attack, we need to come up with the amount listed here to attack. Well, we've got our Furious Strike, so we have 1 attack right here. We could take another exhaustion to get to 2. I think we'll probably just do that. We're going to take another exhaustion to get to 2, thereby eliminating this. We will take a further exhaustion as a penalty right here. So, and we're able to do this as long as the overall amount of our exhaustion does not exceed our maximum, and it doesn't. So now we're at maximum, but we have defeated this enemy. What does that mean? Well, what it means is that when we retire this, we could get 2 victory points, and until we retire it, we could potentially use it either for 3 resolve to purchase something, or by turning it upside down to give us the benefit on the bottom of a card, of any card. So for right now, that's back in our hand, and if we ended our turn right now, it would allow us here in the plane of ice to retire up to 2 cards into our hand, and as well to draw a card. We only really have the cards. I don't think we're going to retire cards, and this is a little bit where playing not strictly with opposition to the other character comes in, because if I was really doing that, I might consider this option more, because it is only by the retired cards that you get the victory points, but I don't really want to do that right now. So this rest action is actually not going to benefit me too terribly much. However, I could, without exhausting myself further, because I have no more exhaustion, I could retire this and come up with 3 resolve to look at the offer and see if there's something that I want to buy for 3. This is off camera. I'm going to examine it, and I think I am actually going to do this, and I'll tell you what I'm going to purchase. I'm going to purchase something I don't usually purchase, which is a movement card. This is a dodge card that, if it is buffed up either by taking 2 exhaustion or this skill token, of which I don't have any, it could give me potentially 4 movement. Well, why am I doing that? I'm doing that because what I'm faced with right here to try to complete my final quest is, again, just a location situation, and I may find myself having to move further around than I want to. So we'll take a look here at the map, and we can see that the haven is here. You're instructed to build out with the haven in the middle. And actually, I see, you know what, full disclosure, I'm realizing I built this map incorrectly, because I was meant to go out only 2 from the haven on either side and up. I've already made a mistake here, but in any case, that's water under the bridge, because the game's almost over. So I built the map incorrectly, but having the movement card at this stage with what's remaining here will be useful. So that is what I have chosen to purchase, and then as you know from playing deck builders, when you buy something, it goes into your discard pile, so we're going to clean that all up and then refresh. And in this case, the cleanup phase would occur, and then we would rest if we were here with no enemy and get this benefit. However, as I said, this benefit is not useful to us. So that is the turn of the Ravencrag Fury. I was going to do a whole turn for her too, so as not to leave her behind, but I'm just going to talk through some. I'm not going to actually do the turn. I'm just going to talk through some of the issues with her. Her current chapter plot is, or excuse me, her quest is this sorcerer's plots that she's trying to uncover, and we need to find one of the underlings of the enemy and sever their connection in preparation for a final confrontation. And in order to do that, we need to retire a brigand enemy token in a key location. It just so happens that there is a brigand enemy token here at the Empty Inn, and that is a key location. However, she can't get there is the problem. She's got the exit cost here of 1. I just don't think she can get there, can she? She needs to, let's see, maybe I am going to end up doing her turn. She needs to leave. She's only got 3 cards in her hand because she is at full exhaustion. And indeed, actually at full exhaustion, I'm realizing she can't even attack. So none of this is going to be possible. But just to show you a little bit of how the game works, let's just pretend, for example, she didn't have all those exhaustions, although she still had the same 3 cards. Here are some of the ways the game could work. She could do her hard march out of the battlefield into the Ancient Barrow. Being in the Ancient Barrow, she needs to have 2 exhaustion or movement to get over into the Empty Inn. So she could spend, say, if she wasn't totally exhausted, she could spend 2 exhaustion and actually get to the Empty Inn. The other person she's got, or the other thing she has in her arsenal, is this ally, the Herdan. He gives her either 1 attack, or she could draw 3 cards and then discard one of them. Now, she would need 5 attack to take care of this mercenary here. That's a pretty big enemy. So she could risk it, for example. She's got only these 2 attack in her hand. But she has her, oh, no, she doesn't. She doesn't even have that skill. So she's only got the 2 attack. She could risk using her ally to draw 3 cards. And let's just see. So say she draws the top 3 cards. 1, 2, 3. Here she goes. And And she got a Scout Ahead, an Arcane Mastery, and a Fist of Flame. She has to discard one, so let's say she discards her Scouting. She doesn't need that. She could, with her sorcery or magical skill token, actually get to 5, because this could become 4, say, for example, and she already had this one in her hand, thereby destroying this and accomplishing her quest. Now, as I said, this could not happen because she was already exhausted, but had she not been exhausted, I'm just walking you through it to show you the options in the game. The other thing in terms of actions that can happen that I didn't really cover is we've gone over the pay with the attack to eliminate an enemy. This one is pretty key. You could use a scouting icon to draw your own cards from your deck. So when she had 3 cards at the beginning, I don't believe she had a scouting icon, but if she did, she could have used that to gain more cards and potentially increase her situation. We covered the scouting action, we covered the movement and the purchase as well, and then that was the quest action. So those are a look at some of the options in the game. To summarize my thoughts on this game, in this small box, it really does give the feeling of an expansive exploration over the 22 locations. If you allow yourself to think about the minor flavor text of the chapters of your quests, it does let you feel like, oh, she's there tracking someone down, or a different type of exploration quest to set up a trade route, that you have tasks that you can do. Where I think the game is a little rough around the edges, and as I said at the earlier portion of the video, I'm curious if anybody has played the actual Brash Hero solo rules. Have you going against an AI that in essence almost automatically gets to retire enemies and gets to retire cards into their chronicle, their arsenal of victory points, such that I think it just becomes a runaway chasing situation where you are never going to catch up, and in essence you might as well just play the game out yourself with some type of timing mechanism, I think, to force an end game or force you to stop playing at a certain point, because otherwise, given the exhaustion and recovery mechanism of being back at the inn, you could just keep playing and playing and playing, and there would be no tension whatsoever. So there's a little bit of a fine line. I'm realizing now, of course, I've just messed up this game that I was playing for a couple of hours. It is a long game. It is a long game. As I said, I was playing with the 2 characters and attempting to have the timing mechanism whereby the world quests, of which there are 25, interspersed with the 4 villains, became the timing mechanism, much as something like in the Pathfinder card game, you have the blessings counting down. I think there's 30 blessings in a game. That's kind of what I was doing here, to give basically within 30 turns needing to accomplish your exploration quest, your search quest, as well as eliminate the villains. And the villains in this scenario are so great that they can only be eliminated cooperatively by each player contributing some aspect of firepower to the elimination. It wasn't perfect, and again, it did result in a multi-hour game, really, in terms of the length of it. But I'll say that if you like kind of card manipulation and tough decisions really at every turn, in terms of should you move, should you buy something, should you try to explore in such a way as to set yourself up down the road for getting the kind of thing that you need to fulfill your quest, I really recommend seeking this one out. The rulebook is unfortunately not great, and I showed you some outright just contradictions in it that were super confusing to me, as well as an indication of a card count on the outside of the box that clearly does not match the card count on the inside of the box. And in fact, inside the box, not only are the 5 hirelings pictured, but there, it does say in the list that there's only 5 of them. I unfortunately never noticed that until I had been like searching through the whole thing forever. But I can't really be upset by that, because all of that searching caused me to not sell the game, because I thought I had an incomplete game suddenly, and therefore I got interested in it again and just kind of looking through the rules and stuff to say, well, you know, let me give this another try. And I am really, really glad that I did. The other thing I will say is that if you do get the game and you get the game used and it's really disorganized, the coloration among the types of cards, as you can see, is really a little bit uneven, so that these cards are all 3 different cards and need to go in different places when you're organizing it. And some of the cards will be horizontal in orientation, but part of a stack that everything else is vertical. And that's just so, for example, this card goes in the gold stack. It does not go with some of the other cards that are also in vertical orientation. Not a big deal, but it took me, and I'm a little slow-witted when it comes to things like this, it took me a while to figure out. So those are my thoughts on Chronicles of Frost, and I am, you know, I just messed up the messed up the end of my game, but I'm going to take it right back out again when I'm done with this video and see if I can figure out a way to play with just one hero and come up with a timing mechanism that makes sense, where the game is somewhat shorter and there's enough pressure to get the quests done. If anybody has figured that out, how many game turns that would be, please put it up in the comments, because I do like playing with the 2 heroes, because one really can help the other one out in terms of scouting and things of that nature, but it does make the game not only long, but it even increases the footprint even further, and that is that's an issue for me at the moment.